All right, ready to dive in. Today we're tackling Seth Godin's Linchpin. Expert speaker. You've really been digging into this one.
Yeah, it's a book that kind of stays with you, you know?
Definitely thought-provoking.
Yeah.
So for our listeners who maybe haven't had a chance to crack it open yet, give us the high-level overview. What's Godin's big message?
Well, he's basically saying the whole game of work has changed. It used to be enough to just show up, do your job, and climb the ladder.
Right, like clock in, clock out, collect your paycheck.
Exactly. But that's not cutting it anymore. Now it's all about being indispensable, becoming what he calls a linchpin.
And that word, linchpin, it's so powerful. It really gets to the core of what he's talking about, that feeling of being essential, irreplaceable.
Right, like you're not just a cog in the machine, you're the thing holding it all together, and that's where the art comes in.
Okay, hold on, art. I work in accounting. I'm not exactly Michelangelo here.
He's not talking about painting or sculpting. It's more about bringing that uniquely human element to your work. You know, being creative, taking initiative, connecting with people on a deeper level. That's stuff that robots can't replicate.
Okay, I'm starting to see the picture here. So let's jump into the book chapter by chapter. In chapter 1, The New World of Work, Godin lays out this pretty bleak picture. He says the old take care of you bargain is gone, and we're basically on our own. Is he being a little dramatic, or is it really that bad?
I think he's trying to shake us out of our complacency. The old model of work, that stable job, that gold watch at retirement, it's fading fast for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Industries are changing, companies are downsizing, automation is taking over.
So we can't just rely on the system to take care of us anymore.
Right. We have to create our own security by becoming so valuable, so essential that they can't afford to lease us.
Which is where the linchpin comes in. But Godin makes this interesting point. He says we're like scared civilians giving up freedom for the comfort of being told what to do. Is he saying we're all just afraid to step up and take ownership?
I think there's some truth to that. We're so conditioned to follow the rules, not rock the boat. But to be a linchpin, you have to be willing to challenge the status quo, think differently, take risks. That's where the real growth happens.
Okay, that leads perfectly into chapter 2. Godin says the world is divided into two groups. Those who make things better and those who don't. Is he saying every single one of us has the potential to be a world changer, even if we're stuck in a job we hate?
Absolutely. It's not about your job title, it's about your mindset. Are you the kind of person who brings energy and solutions, or are you just going through the motions?
So even small actions can make a difference.
Absolutely. Offering a helpful suggestion in a meeting, going the extra mile for a customer, bringing a more positive attitude, those things matter.
It's about making a choice, right? Choosing to be the person who makes things better no matter how small.
Exactly. And that leads us to chapter 3, the lizard brain.
Oh yeah, this is where Godin gets into the psychology of why it's so hard to do great work. He says we have this lizard brain that's constantly trying to sabotage us.
Right. It's that primal part of our brain that's wired for survival, for staying safe and comfortable. It hates risk, it hates change, and it definitely hates standing out from the crowd.
Which is the opposite of what a linchpin does.
Exactly. So becoming a linchpin is about recognizing that lizard brain and choosing to act in spite of it.
So we have to tame the lizard. But how?
It takes practice.
Yeah.
Every time you push yourself outside of your comfort zone, every time you face a fear and do it anyway, you're strengthening that linchpin muscle.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like a mental workout.
Hmm.
And that brings us to one of my favorite chapters, chapter 5, the gift of emotional labor.
This is where he really dives into the human element of work.
Right, the idea of bringing your full self to the table, not just your skills and knowledge.
He talks about shifting our focus from tasks to gifts. It's about being present, connecting with people, bringing generosity and empathy to our interactions.
I love that. It's about making work more human, less transactional.
Exactly. But it's also important to recognize that emotional labor can be draining. You have to set boundaries and make sure you're taking care of yourself, too.
Right, you can't pour from an empty cup. Okay, Godin really goes after traditional organizational structures in chapter 6, the resistance. He even says most management consists of making it difficult for people to work. Wow. Is he being a little harsh?
I think he's trying to wake us up to how much bureaucracy and outdated systems can stifle creativity and prevent people from doing their best work. Think about all the hoops you have to jump through just to get simple things done in a big organization.
It's like this invisible force field holding us back. And he calls it the resistance. But the scary part is, he says it's not just out there, it's also inside us.
Right. The resistance is also that inner voice of fear, self-doubt, and procrastination. It's what keeps us playing it safe, settling for mediocrity.
He really calls us out on that, doesn't he? He says, are you as good as you are capable of being? Probably not.
Ouch. But it's a good question to ask ourselves, right? Absolutely. It's a call to step up, to raise our own standards, to embrace the discomfort of growth.
So recognize the resistance, both internal and external, and push through it. Okay, ready to move on to Chapter 7.
Ship it. One of the most powerful concepts in the book.
This is where things get real. Godin says the only purpose of starting is to finish, to actually put your work out into the world. But that's the scariest part. What if it's not perfect? What if people hate it?
He addresses that head on. He says perfection is a myth. It's what keeps us stuck and prevents us from shipping anything at all.
So it's better to ship something imperfect than to never ship anything at all.
Exactly. Think about a software company that waits for a product to be 100% perfect before releasing it. By that time, the market has moved on, their competition has already shipped something, and they've lost their edge.
Makes sense.
Right.
But for someone like me who tends to overthink everything, that's a tough pill to swallow.
It's about shifting your mindset from perfection to progress. Embrace the imperfections, the mistakes, the failures. They're all part of the learning process.
You know, it's funny. He tells this story about putting a Big Mac in a milkshake and asking for a refund, just to make a point.
He's basically saying we get so caught up in the rules, we forget to use common sense and connect with each other on a human level.
Sometimes the rules are just meant to be broken, right? Especially when they get in the way of doing something great.
Exactly. Be willing to question the status quo and think for yourself. Okay, next up, the dip.
Chapter 8, everyone's favorite. This is where Godin talks about that inevitable period of struggle and frustration that we all face when we're trying to achieve something worthwhile.
It's that point where you want to give up, where the resistance is screaming at you to quit. But the linchpin recognizes the dip for what it is, a necessary part of the journey.
So it's that wall we hit right before the breakthrough. And quitting the wrong thing is giving in to the resistance.
Exactly. The resistance loves the dip. It gives us a convenient excuse to go back to our comfort zones. But the linchpin knows that pushing through the dip is where the real growth happens.
That's where you build resilience. You discover your true potential.
Right. And speaking of things that can make the dip feel even deeper, Godin talks about how the internet is like crack cocaine for the resistance. So true.
I mean, with all the distractions, the notifications, the endless scroll, it's like a recipe for procrastination. How are we supposed to stay focused on the work that matters?
It's a constant battle. The linchpin is aware of those distractions and consciously creates systems and habits to minimize them. Turn off notifications, block distracting websites, set aside dedicated time for focused work.
So be intentional, create boundaries, and don't let the internet suck you into the vortex.
Exactly. Okay, ready to move on to Chapter 9.
Draw your own map. This one really spoke to me.
It's about recognizing that the old maps, the traditional paths to success, don't always apply anymore.
He makes this great analogy. He says we're like timid trapeze artists, too afraid to let go of the bar and take the leap.
Right. But the linchpin understands that sometimes you have to create your own path, even if it means stepping into the unknown.
So it's about being comfortable with uncertainty, with not knowing exactly where you're going to land.
It's about trusting your instincts, being willing to experiment, and embracing the adventure. And sometimes the most rewarding journeys are the ones we chart ourselves.
Love that. Okay, let's talk about Chapter 10, the art of being remarkable. Godin says the goal is to become the kind of person the world believes is indispensable. But how do we go from replaceable cog to irreplaceable linchpin? It feels like such a huge leap.
It starts with a shift in mindset. It's about recognizing that you do have something unique and valuable to offer, and then finding ways to express that in your work.
He talks about these gifts again. But what kinds of gifts are we talking about? Bringing donuts for the team, staying late to finish a project.
He's talking about gifts of creativity, initiative, insight, emotional labor, the things that make you stand out, that make you a valuable asset.
So it's about being a giver, not a taker.
Exactly. And that generosity, that willingness to go above and beyond, that's what makes you indispensable.
Okay, I'm starting to get this. So it's not just about working hard, it's about working smart, about bringing those uniquely human qualities to the table. But Godin also acknowledges that linchpins are rare. So how do we become one of those rare and valuable people?
It's a journey, not a destination. It starts with that fundamental choice to show up differently, to embrace your unique strengths and passions, and find ways to apply them in your work and life.
Okay, I'm ready for the challenge, but let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue our deep dive into Linchpin and explore some practical strategies for putting these powerful ideas into practice.
So before we jumped into something else, we were talking about making that choice to be the linchpin.
Yeah, like are we in or are we out? Are we going to be indispensable or just kind of blend into the background?
And once you make that choice, things start to shift. You start to see the world of work differently.
Okay, I'm ready for that shift. Let's keep going with the book. In chapter 12, there is no map. Godin talks about how the new economy belongs to people who see things differently. But I feel like most of us are kind of wired to follow the rules. You know, go to school, get a job, climb the ladder.
It's definitely ingrained in us.
So is he saying we should just throw out the rule book entirely?
Not necessarily. It's more about recognizing that the old rules, the old maps, they don't always apply anymore.
He says the map is not the territory. What does that even mean?
Think about it like this. You have a map of a city, right? But the city's changed since the map was made. New roads, old roads are closed.
You'd be lost.
Exactly. So you need a new map, or you need to be willing to explore without one.
So we need to be adaptable, willing to adjust our course as we go. But how do we know which direction to go in when there's no clear path?
That's where the linchpin mindset comes in. You have to be willing to create your own map.
Define our own goals, figure out what's important to us, and chart our own course.
Exactly. It's about being proactive, taking initiative, not waiting for someone to tell you what to do.
So being comfortable with uncertainty.
Which can be really scary, I get it, but the more you embrace the unknown, the more comfortable you become with navigating unfamiliar territory.
Think about all the great explorers and innovators. They didn't have maps. They had to figure it out as they went.
Right, and that's what makes it so exciting.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this linchpin mindset is about more than just work. It's about embracing a whole new way of thinking and being in the world.
Exactly. It's about being adaptable, resourceful, and always willing to learn and grow.
Ornate, I want to talk about something that really resonated with me. The curse of reciprocity in chapter 13. You know that trap we fall into where we do favors with the expectation of getting something in return?
Like we're keeping score.
Yeah. How do we break free from that cycle?
It's about shifting your mindset from transactional to generous.
So giving without expecting anything in return.
Yeah.
But doesn't that set you up to be taken advantage of?
Not necessarily. Think about it. When you give freely, you build trust, you create goodwill, you become someone people want to work with.
It's like you're attracting abundance rather than trying to hoard it.
Exactly. And Godin gives this really interesting example about Zappos.
The shoe company.
Yeah, they offer new employees money to quit.
What? Why would they do that?
It's a way of weeding out the people who are just there for a paycheck and keeping the ones who are truly passionate about the company's mission.
So they're basically saying, if you're not all in, don't waste our time or yours.
Exactly. It's a pretty bold move, but it's worked for them.
Okay. In chapter 14, The Culture of Connection, Godin talks about the importance of authenticity and transparency, which is kind of ironic in a world where everyone is so carefully curating their online personas.
Right. It's easy to feel like you have to put on a mask all the time, but the linchpin is comfortable being themselves.
So is he saying we need to bring our whole selves to work? Even the messy parts?
It's not about airing your dirty laundry. It's about being genuine in your interactions with others. Letting people see the real you.
Exactly. And that's how you build real connections.
He talks about honest signals, which seems like a rare commodity these days with so much noise and spin out there. How do we cut through all that and connect with people in a meaningful way?
It's about being congruent in your actions and your words.
So walking the talk.
Exactly. People can spot a fake a mile away, so just be yourself, be authentic, be real, and let those qualities shine through.
Okay, I love that. But it's definitely easier said than done sometimes. Now, Godin also talks about how the internet can be both a gift economy and a platform for procrastination.
It's a double-edged sword, right? On one hand, you have access to so much information and so many opportunities to connect with people, but on the other hand, it's so easy to get sucked into the vortex of distraction.
So true. How do we navigate that duality?
It's about being mindful and intentional.
So set boundaries, create systems, and be aware of those triggers that send you down the rabbit hole of procrastination.
Right, and remember that the internet is a tool. You can use it for good or for evil. It's up to you. Okay, let's jump ahead to chapter 17. The boss is not your customer. This one really caught my attention.
It's a real mind shift.
Godin says the people who get paid to make change are artists. I love that. But isn't that kind of a romanticized view of work?
I think he's trying to challenge our assumptions about what it means to be a valuable employee. He's saying that the people who are truly indispensable are the ones who can bring creativity and initiative to their work.
So not just following orders, but actually thinking for yourself, coming up with new ideas.
Exactly. And that's where the art comes in. It's about seeing things differently, making connections that others miss, creating something new and valuable.
But what about our bosses? Don't we still need to keep them happy?
He's not saying you should ignore your boss or disregard their instructions. It's more about thinking about your work in a broader context.
So who is our customer if it's not our boss?
It's the person or people who benefit from the work you do.
So it could be your clients, your colleagues, the wider community.
Exactly. It's about understanding the impact of your work and focusing on creating value for those you serve.
He talks about how most organizations are focused on return on machines, maximizing efficiency, squeezing every last drop of productivity out of their employees.
Like we're just cogs in a giant machine.
Right. And is he saying that's a bad thing? I mean, efficiency is important, right?
It is. But Godin is making the case that we need to find a balance between efficiency and humanity.
So not just treating people like robots.
Exactly. We need to create work environments where people feel valued, respected, and empowered to do their best work.
Okay, I love this idea of creating a more human-centered workplace.
Yeah.
But he also acknowledges that linchpins are rare. So how do we become one of those rare and valuable people?
It's a journey, not a destination. And it starts with that fundamental choice to show up differently, to embrace your unique strengths and passions, and to find ways to apply them in your work.
So how do we actually do that? Where do we even begin?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's one we'll explore in more detail after we finish up this chapter.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. Let's dive back into the book. He talks about how the linchpin can't succeed in isolation. So this isn't just about individual effort. We need other people to make this work.
Absolutely. We need a support system. We need people who challenge us, inspire us, and help us stay accountable.
So find your tribe, find your people.
Exactly. The linchpin understands that they're part of a larger ecosystem, a team, a community, a network. And they actively cultivate those connections, building relationships based on trust, respect, and mutual support.
He ends the book with this really powerful statement. The only thing keeping you from being one of these artists is the resistance. So is he saying that we all have the potential to be linchpins, but we're just getting in our own way?
I think that's exactly what he's saying. The resistance is real, it's powerful, but it's not insurmountable.
So we have to fight for it. We have to actively choose to overcome those fears and doubts and step into our full potential.
Yes, and that's where the real magic happens, when we stop listening to that voice of fear and start listening to the voice of our own hearts.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. I'm feeling inspired and ready to take action. But where do we go from here? What are some concrete steps we can take to start embodying this linchpin mindset? Okay, so before we got sidetracked, we were talking about taking action and putting this linchpin mindset into practice.
Right, because it's one thing to read about it, it's another to actually live it.
Totally.
Yeah.
So where do we even begin? Godin throws around this idea of becoming indispensable, making a difference. It sounds great, but it also feels kind of overwhelming. Like, where's the instruction manual for this whole linchpin thing?
Yeah, that's the thing. There isn't one. And that's kind of the point, It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of deal.
So how do we figure out what works for us?
It's about self-discovery, figuring out what makes you unique, what you're good at, what you're passionate about, and then finding ways to bring that to your work.
Okay, so embrace your individuality, let your freak flag fly. But what if my unique talents don't exactly align with my current job? Like, I'm pretty sure my boss doesn't want to see my interpretive dance skills in the next budget meeting.
Well, and that's where Godin's idea of gifts comes in. And it's not about having some grand talent or skill. It's about finding those small ways to go above and beyond, to bring a little bit of yourself, your humanity, to everything you do. Remember that barista example.
Right, those small gestures, those moments of connection, they can make a big difference.
Exactly. You don't have to be the CEO to be a linchpin. You can be a linchpin in your own little corner of the world.
So find those little opportunities to shine, to make a difference, even within a system that might feel kind of soul-crushing at times.
And don't underestimate the power of those small actions. They can have a ripple effect.
It's about shifting the energy, right? But how do we do that without burning ourselves out? Emotional labor can be exhausting, especially if you feel like you're the only one putting in the extra effort.
And that's why it's so important to build a network of support, find your people, your tribe. Godin talks about how the linchpin can't succeed in isolation, and it's so true.
We need those people who get us, who inspire us, who challenge us to be better.
Absolutely. People who will celebrate your wins and pick you up when you fall, because you will fall. We all do.
Speaking of falling, what about those inner demons we were talking about earlier? That voice of resistance, that fear and self-doubt. How do we deal with that?
That voice is always going to be there, but you can learn to turn down the volume. And here's the thing, the resistance is usually strongest when you're on the verge of doing something truly great.
So it's almost like a signpost, a signal that you're on the right track.
Exactly. If you're not feeling any resistance, you're probably playing it too safe. Embrace the discomfort, the fear, because that's where the growth happens.
It's a sign that you're pushing your boundaries, stepping outside of your comfort zone.
Right. And that's how you become the linchpin you were meant to be.
Okay, feeling inspired, but also trying to stay grounded here. Not everyone's going to be a CEO or a rock star. How can we apply these linchpin principles in a way that feels achievable, even if we're not chasing some grand vision of success?
Well, and remember what Godin says about tiny changes remade again and again. It's not about some massive overnight transformation.
It's the small, consistent actions that add up over time.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of momentum. Start with one small thing. Offer a helpful suggestion in a meeting. Take the initiative on a project. Be the person who brings a little bit of sunshine to the office. Those little things, they matter.
So keep it simple. Focus on those small wins. I like that. But what about the bigger picture? How do we know if we're actually making progress on this linchpin journey?
Well, Godin talks a lot about shipping your work, putting your ideas out there, getting feedback, iterating. It's not enough to just have good ideas. You got to do something with it.
Take action, right?
Right.
But what if we fail? I mean, what if we put ourselves out there and it doesn't go as planned?
Failure is part of the process. The linchpin understands that failure is not the opposite of success. It's a stepping stone.
So embrace those setbacks, learn from them, and keep going.
Easier said than done, I know. But the more you do it, the easier it gets.
So be patient, persistent, trust the process.
And don't forget to have fun along the way. This whole linchpin thing is about bringing more joy and meaning to your work and life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I'm feeling fired up and ready to embrace my inner linchpin.
Me too. And to our listeners, we hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into linchpin as much as we have.
It's been a wild ride. Thanks for joining us. And remember, the choice to be indispensable to make a difference is yours. Go out there and create some magic.